This is the most important exercise in the course. Not because it's difficult, the steps are straightforward, but because your 360 data contains your diagnosis, and most people have never read it through the right lens. They read the scores, they read the comments, they feel good about the highs and defensive about the lows. What they don't do is look for the pattern that tells them which gap is primary. That's what we're doing now. You're about to apply the ACE framework to your own data that's been underutilized because you didn't have the lens to read it diagnostically. In Module 2, you learned each gap's data signature, self-other divergence for expression, liked but not followed for authority, cross-rater variance for context. Now you're applying all three lenses to the same data set. Step 1. Take your most recent 360-degree feedback results. If you don't have formal 360 data, use performance review comments from at least 3 different stakeholder groups: your manager, your peers, and your direct reports. The minimum requirement is feedback from multiple perspectives. A single manager's review is not sufficient. Informal feedback from one colleague is not sufficient. The diagnostic power of 360 data comes from multiple perspectives on the same behavior. One viewpoint tells you how one person sees you. 3 viewpoints tell you where the pattern is. Step 2. Look at where your self-ratings and stakeholder ratings diverge by more than a point. Here's the critical question. Is that divergence consistent across all rater groups, or does it split by audience? If the divergence is consistent, direct reports, peers, and seniors all see the same gap. The issue is either expression or authority. If the divergence splits by audience group, high ratings from some stakeholders, low from others, the gap is context. That single distinction, consistent or split, is the diagnostic fork. Getting it right determines whether your development path addresses the actual gap. On screen, you can see the fork mapped out. Let me walk through 2 real patterns. A VP of product pulls her 360. Her self-ratings on engagement are 4.5. All 3 rater groups rate her visibility significantly lower. Direct reports, peers, and her SVP all around 3.0. Everyone sees the same gap. The feedback, hard to read in meetings, doesn't show her thinking. Consistent divergence plus visibility language equals expression gap. Confirmed. Now contrast that. A director of engineering promoted from a startup acquisition reviews his 360. His startup colleagues rate him 4.4. His corporate peers rate him 2.6. Corporate feedback, too informal, dismissive of process. Startup feedback, authentic, direct. Same behavior, 2 evaluation templates. Audience split equals context gap. Sometimes you'll see both patterns in the same data. Consistent divergence and audience splits. When that happens, the consistent pattern reveals the primary gap. The split reveals a secondary context signal. A newly promoted CFO pulls his 360. His self-rating on leadership presence is 4.2. All rater groups rate him between 2.8 and 3.1. Consistent divergence. The feedback language acts like the VP of finance, not the CFO. Too much detail in board presentations. Doesn't project strategic vision. Consistent divergence plus register language equals authority gap. His ACE assessment scored authority lowest. Confirmed. The primary gap gets addressed first. The secondary signal gets monitored. The language in your feedback is diagnostic. Visibility words, doesn't show thinking, seems disengaged. Hard to read, these point to expression. Register words, acts like a manager, too in the weeds, doesn't project strategic vision, these point to authority. And Split evaluations, same behavior, getting different ratings from different groups. These point to context. This is the cross-rater variance pattern from Module 2, Video 2.32. The split itself is the diagnosis. You don't need to interpret what the feedback means. You need to notice whether it's consistent or split and what kind of language it uses. Pause this video and pull up your 360 data right now. If you don't have it on this device, write down the answers to 2 questions from memory. First, where do your self-ratings diverge most from how others rate you? Second, does that divergence look the same across all rater groups, or does it split? Consistent or split? That answer points to your gap type. One common mistake to avoid: averaging your 360 scores instead of disaggregating by rater group and dimension. The diagnostic value is in the pattern, not the mean. And don't read all low scores as I need to improve everything. The ACE framework says focus on the widest gap first, not all gaps simultaneously. Compare this result to your ACE assessment hypothesis from the previous video. Do they agree? If yes, you have a confirmed primary gap. If they disagree, trust the 360 data over the self-assessment, because the 360 captures what others see, and that external perception is where the gap lives. You now have 2 data points: your ACE assessment score and your 360 analysis. In the next video, we bring those together into a gap profile, your primary gap, your secondary signal, and the specific module path that addresses each one.